What's up? We're doing a live video to our community call, to our group here today. We're going to be talking all about foods to avoid for your weight loss journey. So this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be all about those specific foods that you should be avoiding, right? So to start off with, we're going to be doing a full presentation here with this one. So I'm really excited for this. If you have any questions, please share them to the live stream so that we can get those answered. And I will try to follow along on my phone to make sure that I am seeing those. We'll make sure that we're up and running here first. Yep, good to go here. All right, so just let me know if you are watching this, just comment, say hey, or give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Make sure that all of my things are ready to go. Had to get a different laptop because my MacBook decided to stop working. So we got that going for us for now. So, all right, awesome. So we got this ready. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this, about foods to avoid for weight loss. And as you're going to see right at the beginning here, surprise, the good, bad, and why we actually don't label foods like this. So you're going to find that there are no foods that you should avoid on your weight loss journey. And I'm going to go into a couple of reasons why. So why labeling foods just doesn't work. A lot of the times, especially with clients, we find that we're labeling foods as good or bad, and it's totally normal. So I don't blame you for doing this. And I don't blame you for having this mindset because it's something that we see all the time, right? We have family members, we have ourselves, we have the media calling foods good that are like vegetables, your whole grains. Most of the time, they're minimally processed, nutrient-dense foods that we label as good, right? And then we also label foods as bad, where it's like sweets or desserts. Maybe it's those highly processed foods that offer little to no nutritional value. And that's usually what people will call good or bad, right? And before we go into why we don't sort those foods as good or bad buckets, we want to be very clear with this. The nutritional differences between these two are quite easy to spot, right? You can see how there's more nutrition and what most people call good and less nutrition in what most people call bad. But many of the so-called bad foods in high amounts can raise the risk for a variety of diseases, and they're also incredibly hard to resist. So the food industry really has created cheap, easily accessible products that our taste buds and brains absolutely love, but are they actually bad? And we don't use that terminology for 6 major reasons. So you're going to have 6 reasons here why we don't label foods good or bad. And then I'm also going to talk you through how to get out of this mindset and maybe some things that can help you along your journey so that you don't find yourself in this good or bad, like moral dilemma. So number one single food doesn't define your entire diet. So think of it this way, like if you're just eating one food your entire life, you're probably not, right? So instead of thinking like, oh, this one food is bad, are you actually in balance is the question that we want to think of here. So what does that mean? We experience massive benefits, fat loss, improved health, when we go from poor nutrition to average or above, right? So what that's going to look like is going to be where, as far as like balance, we want to have like more foods coming from a variety of places. And that's where we're going to go from poor nutrition to average or above average. But eventually we do see diminishing returns here. So as you can see on this chart, whenever we get into, most people are at like 40% of their foods coming from nutrient dense foods. And you can see where this ups the health benefits of it, right? And then as we continue to go up and we get to 90% of foods coming from whole, minimally processed foods, you also run the risk of eating disorders like orthorexia. And orthorexia is just an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. You may have seen people that have this kind of thing going on, right? They're the people that if you put McDonald's in front of them, like the whole world would collapse, right? And so we want to be kind of in between this. And in the most, you've probably heard this before, like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your food is coming from mostly nutrient-dense foods, and then 20% of your food is coming from maybe more highly processed and nutrient-poor foods. So like your sweets and your chips and things like that. So what we want to do to move into that, like in here somewhere where you're getting the health benefits and also increasing the nutrient-dense foods with which goes hand in hand, we want to consider small actions to make your diet just a little bit better. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later in this, but you're slowly adding in more nutrient dense foods in to each of your meals, things like that. Right. Moving forward into this, number 2 is no one food is bad for all people in all situations. So my favorite example to this is kind of like, think of people with allergies, for example. So peanut butter for one person might be good for their diet. Another person might be allergic to nuts. They can't eat that. Or in this example, like many people see pop or soda as a bad food because it's loaded with sugar, lacking in vitamins and minerals, but is it bad in all situations? So let's say you're visiting a country with no safe drinking water. In that case, the soda or the pop with its airtight seal is a much better option than the water there, right? Or maybe you're 60 sweaty miles into a 100-mile bike race and your blood sugar is super low, you're hallucinating flying pink elephants. In that case, the sugar and the caffeine from the pop might make the difference between finishing the race and having a no finish, right? So in that situation, a pop might work really well for that person. Or for example, I've been sick for the past couple of days. I've had a hard time keeping food down. So in that case, having a calorie dense drink is going to be very beneficial for me to get in those calories when I can't really eat other foods. You know what I mean? So our individual physiology and psychology also affects what happens when we eat specific foods. So added sugar, for example, affects someone with type 2 diabetes differently than it affects someone whose cells are insulin sensitive. So somebody who works out a lot, they might be able to drink that pop after a workout. And usually after a workout, you're pretty insulin sensitive. And they could get a lot of benefits from doing that. Somebody maybe who is more overweight or insulin resistant isn't going to get as much from that pop than that other person might get. So you can see how it is very individual, each food and in each situation. And here's how you kind of want to think of it is, what is the context here? So rather than zeroing in on a list of universally bad foods, consider the context of it. So who's eating? The same food can affect one person differently than another based on a range of physiological and psychological factors. So think of your level of fitness, your personal health, your food preferences, allergies and intolerance. So for example, myself, I might be able to handle dairy, but somebody with a dairy intolerance isn't able to. If you're lactose intolerant, then you might not, then maybe lactose isn't the best for you, right? Think of your overall dietary pattern, your psychological state, relationships. And then why are you eating? So different foods can affect the same person differently depending on the situation. So mindless munching, maybe you have the munchies, refueling during or after intense exercise. So like I said, you can be more insulin sensitive during and after your lifting session. Emotional stress plays into this, fatigue, maybe intentionally indulging. So like going in and having like a free meal or a refeed meal, something like that. And then another context is, what is your goal? So certain foods make it easier or harder to reach certain goals. So fat loss. So this might be where you include more like of our diet foods or like lower calorie foods. Maybe you're aiming for muscle gain or actually weight gain. For those people, a higher calorie food, maybe like a big cheeseburger and fries, is going to make a lot more sense. Maybe for that person who's struggling to gain weight, something like that. Is your goal more energy or more focus, improve your health, boost athletic performance? There's so many different things that go into this that, you can see how labeling a food good or bad wouldn't make sense in that situation. Next, the third reason why we don't do it is because demonizing certain foods can make them even more appealing. I like to think of this in the, if you've ever told your toddler not to do something or your teenager not to do something, it almost makes them want to do it more. And the same thing happens with us whenever we label foods as good or bad. Lots of people say that 100% abstaining from bad foods is the only way they can maintain any control around their eating. And if they say okay to one bad food, they worry they'll open up the floodgates to a diet swollen with cookies, brownies, chips, and fries, as well as devoid of veggies and a whole other whole foods, right? But here's the thing, there's a subtle difference between demonizing a food and merely abstaining from it because you tend to overeat it. So there's a big difference there. When we demonize foods, we moralize those foods, thinking of ourselves as bad people for eating them. And that's where we want to get out of that because it paradoxically can increase our desire for those very foods that we're trying not to eat. It's almost like in the back of our heads and subconsciously, we're just kind of like, all I want is a freaking cookie right now, because all I can think of is like how bad that cookie is, how good it tastes, and how it's off my diet. And then you get to the end of the week and you're like, wow, I was so good. I was so quote unquote good that I can have this cookie now. And then it leads to eating the cookie, feeling bad, and it leads to this like restrict binge cycle, right? So it's true that some people can restrict certain bad foods for a while, but for a lot of people, for most people, the cravings eventually overwhelm your ability to restrict. And when you eat that thing, you feel bad. So then you eat even more. And you may even try like stop. It might even stop you from reaching your goals because you get into this cycle. And again, it creates that vicious like binge restrict cycle that you can see here. So initial excitement, say you signed up for my program, you're like, woo, we're doing awesome. And then you have this period of restrictive eating. Maybe you join the program and you still think of foods as good or bad, and you restrict yourself from certain things. And then you see a lot of results from it. And then maybe after the program's over, you return back to what you were doing before. And then it starts this whole cycle. So then you go back to another one. I see this a lot with people who do like Isogenics or Herbalife or any of those types of programs. They get all excited, like, oh, wow, this like shiny, brand new program, I'm going to do awesome. And then they restrict, and then they see 10 pounds results. And then they go back to how they're eating. They're like, okay, I'm kind of tired of eating shakes for every single freaking meal. And then they start over again. They go back to a different one, right? So you can kind of see how this can be problematic, and we want to stop the cycle somewhere. And the best way to stop it is right here, the period of restrictive eating. So getting to a place where you don't have to be restricted. And let's be clear here, for some people, certain foods may not be worth that struggle, at least for now. And you may decide that if you're around certain foods that you're going to overeat them. So you might want them out of the house. And that strategy can work. In fact, I've had clients do like kitchen resets, and you remove foods that you tend to overeat, but it's not the same as labeling a food as bad. When we label foods something I tend to overeat rather than bad, we're able to relax, remain flexible, and potentially grow into someone who can enjoy that same food in moderation. So you can see here that like we kind of label it as like a red light food. Like, okay, like maybe if I have Hershey Kisses in my house at all the time, and I'm constantly eating a full bag of those, maybe it's time to kind of maybe put them in the back of the cupboard, or maybe not buy them for a little while until I can feel more in control of my eating habits in that way. So you can see how I didn't label, I'm not like Hershey Kisses are bad. I'm just like, they might not be right for me right now. And you can see how that kind of is a little bit of a mindset shift there. So moving forward, sorry if anyone's commented on the Facebook, my timer went off, and I'll have to change this up a little bit. Bear with me here. Okay, so our next reason why we don't label foods good or bad is because categorizing foods as good and bad can work, but usually only for a while. And you've probably seen this, and I've seen this so many times. So having coached over 100 clients, we can say with confidence that the all or nothing rarely gets us all. Instead, it usually gets us nothing. So for example, when someone decides to stop eating bad foods, usually they try really hard to stay true to their goal. They're committed, and they may even stick to avoiding a long list of forbidden foods for a bit. And I've seen this happen so many times, but then something goes wrong. Maybe you go to work and find that a coworker left homemade brownies on their desk, or every part of your day goes sideways. And in the evening, you find yourself head down in a gallon of chocolate chip cookie dough as you think, man, this is bad, or I'm so bad for doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. Or you're driving for hours to visit relatives, pull into a rest stop, and all you can find to eat is the stuff on your forbidden foods list, right? So that rigidity, good or bad, all or nothing, is the enemy of consistency. But on the flip side, flexibility helps you to stay more consistent. That's because it allows you to lean into all the solutions available to you. So flexibility also frees people to use internal guidance rather than someone else's external rules. So to decide what foods to eat and when to eat them and why. So this helps you so that you can eat the foods that you determine are good for you, right? So you can see how this is, it depends on the person, and you get to decide using your internal guidance what foods are good or bad for you. And we don't want to label them that. We kind of label them on a spectrum, and you've seen this within your food guides. So how do I use my internal guidance here is I like to ask a couple of clients. So consider this, like rather than just avoiding a food like sugar, for example, because some health site told you to, or your coworker was like, wow, that's bad for you, or you've heard it somewhere, right? I always like to ask first, and I didn't include it in this list, is where did this thought come from? Like, who taught you this? That is the biggest thing to consider, and consider the credibility in maybe the person that taught you these things, right? So who taught you this is my first question that I like to ask, because if you can kind of dig deep and be like, okay, like my mom taught me this, or my mom taught me this versus, my personal coach taught me this, or a nutritionist taught me this. There's a big difference there, unless your mom's a nutritionist, right? And it just comes back to like, how credible is this source that I got this from? And then it takes some like going backwards, right? Off on a tangent there, but another question to ask yourself is, am I hungry? Am I stressed? Is this food worth it to me? What else have I eaten today? So if you get to the end of the day, you're starving, you're a lot less likely to make better decisions because you're starving, and you're going to find yourself eating maybe less nutritious foods. What would allow me to truly enjoy this food without going overboard? And one of my favorite things, just like a tactical thing here, is with clients, if we do have a food that feels off limits or bad, I like to include it after a full meal. So for example, I've had a lot of clients, like my favorite dessert is a brownie sundae. So how do I kind of lose the novelty of this is I eat a full meal, a nice, nutritious, filling meal, and then have the brownie sundae after that, after I'm already full. And you're going to find that you probably don't go overboard with it because you're full, you're satisfied, you ate it right after that. Totally fine. And this internal guidance might allow you with maybe like the brownie to say, I really like brownies, but I'm going to save this until after lunch when I'm not as hungry, so I can eat it slowly and really savor it, just like that example that I gave. Or the person who is head down in the gallon of ice cream, you can say, okay, so this was probably more ice cream than my body really needed right now. True, but no getting around that. How can I avoid this, avoid feeling this triggered in the future? And are there other ways I can comfort myself that don't involve raiding the freezer, right? So if you find yourself coming to emotional eating, like what are some other ways that I can kind of handle this? And we have videos on that and trainings on that if you need anything in that department as well. So with the, oh, cool, we can hear it. So with that, as far as like getting to a place where you're not feeling as triggered with those things, like I said, we can find that in other videos. So if that's something that you're interested in, comment on this live stream and just say triggers, and I will send you the free video on how to get through like cravings and trigger foods like that. We do have a little bit on how to do it in here, so I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. As far as with our fifth reason here. So the fifth reason why we don't want to label foods as good or bad, it's really okay and completely normal for you to eat for pleasure. So it's okay to enjoy your food. And that's something that I tell clients all the time is the reason that I'm so successful with my diet and the reason that our most successful clients are so successful with the foods that they eat is because they really enjoy what they're eating. So food serves many purposes far beyond just flooding someone's body with nutrients and calories. So if you've heard the saying food is just fuel, it really isn't. Some foods they taste amazing. Some foods connect us with friends and families. Think of like Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas coming up. They create a sense of belonging. They make celebrations worthwhile. In other words, food isn't just fuel. It's also love and culture and pleasure and a whole lot more than that. So when you think about a food in this way, everything, even your grandma's special Black Forest cake, can have a purpose and a place. Rather than a list of foods you can eat or you can't eat, you instead have choices. You have foods you choose to eat for energy or for pleasure or for health or and many other reasons, whatever important reasons you have. So don't just wait to find pleasure in eating on your untracked days or your free meals. I actually just had a really good conversation with a client about this. Instead of feeling like you can only enjoy yourself on those untracked meals or free days, or on the days that you have refeeds. Figure out ways to make everyday food more enjoyable for best results and for a lifestyle change. So this is where you make the most change, is when you figure out a way to make this enjoyable, when you figure out a way to love the food you're eating, love the fitness routine that you're doing, love your cardio. It makes it that much easier, and it makes it so much easier to make it a lifestyle. Really does. And then our last reason for why we don't label foods as good or bad is when we obsess over bad foods, we tend to rob ourselves of the ability to evolve. So rigidly abstaining can teach us to get really good at abstaining from things. And if you're okay with abstaining from a long list of foods for the rest of your life, there's nothing wrong with that approach. You can totally do that. But if you're not okay with a life sentence of no cookies, no brownies, no cake, no bread, and no pasta, that sounds fucking awful, then you may be happy to learn that there's an alternative approach. So you don't have to do that. It involves getting curious about why you struggle to moderate your consumption of certain foods. So consider this: what leads you to feeling out of control? What triggers the I need this and the I can't stop eating this thoughts? When is it possible to eat this food in moderate amounts, if ever, and when isn't it? And the point here is, rather than zeroing in on bad foods, look for the underlying reasons, which are called triggers, that lead you to actually struggling with these foods. So a trigger can be a feeling. We might eat more when we're stressed, lonely, or bored, and food kind of fills that void for most people. Emotional eating is a huge thing here. A trigger can also be the time of day. We always have a cookie at 11 a.m. or soda at 3 p.m. It's just a part of our routine at this point. So if you find yourself, a big one is like a movie, we have to be like eating something while we're watching a movie. That's a big part of our routine, right? It might be a social setting. So, hey, everyone else is having a beer and chicken wings, so I might as well join in on happy hour. A trigger might be a place. For some reason, a dark movie theater or a parent's kitchen might make us want to munch on something. Another trigger is thought patterns, thinking I deserve this, or life is too hard to chew kale. I hate kale. Might steer us towards like a drive-through window, right? So we kind of think of things as like this or that, instead of like on this continuum with a gray area in between. So to uncover triggers, I like to ask clients like to keep a food and feelings journal. And this is huge. So if you're watching this and you are a client, this is something that I highly recommend. Just reach out to me, send me a message on WhatsApp and be like, hey, I'd love to try this. If any of this has resonated with you, this is something I'd love to start with you. It's where we write down everything you eat and drink, which you probably are already doing this, but then we ask a couple questions on top of this to really uncover your feelings of feeling out of control or cravings and things like that. So along with your food journal, what we kind of write down is when we feel like triggered or anything like that, we ask, what am I feeling? What time is it? Who am I with? So like environment, where am I? And what thoughts am I having? And this can kind of help us to understand like our feedback, and then we can approach it with a feedback, not failure mentality. The point isn't to catch you doing something wrong. It's to help you assess what's really going on. So once we understand like why you're reaching for certain foods, we're better equipped to suggest actions that truly help you to move towards a healthier relationship with all of your foods. So you can see how here, like we kind of get this data to go back on, and we can really understand what's going on from a non-judgmental point of view. And that's the biggest thing, is your coach isn't going to judge you for what you're eating. We're here to help you to discover like why. The whys behind everything is really how you make the most changes. If you understand why something's happening, you can get through it and figure out what to do to change that behavior. So most importantly, if there are no good or bad foods, how can anyone ever know what to eat and what to limit? So that's the biggest thing. A lot of the times, I hear this all the time, because some people assume that if there's no bad foods, then that means all foods are good to eat. All foods are good, so eat whatever you want. But that's not really it at all. We are, however, saying this: rather than sorting food into just two buckets, good or bad, it's usually more helpful for most people to see food on a continuum. And you'll see this within your nutrition guides. You'll see this with the eat more, eat some, and eat less food lists. It's on the spectrum now, right? And this might at first merely sound like another way to sort foods into categories, but it's not. Unlike lists of bad foods, which tend to be universally rigid, a continuum allows everything to be contextual and personalized. So if my goal is to muscle gain, my continuum will look different than if my goal is fat loss. And I talk about this a lot within my prep. My prep foods are a little bit different than when I'm in off season, like I'm in off season right now. Some of those foods change. I add a lot more fats to my foods and things like that. And there's foods that were maybe not on my list during prep that are on my list now that I'm trying to gain weight. So just as an example there. And honestly, this food list changed with the seasons too. Like different foods are in different seasons at different times, right? So that happens too. And we can define that continuum for yourself to find ways to include more, eat more foods and fewer, eat less foods, aiming to make each meal just a little bit better. And I have an example of how you can do this here. So for example, if you find yourself eating a lot of fast food, instead of just being like, okay, like my goal is to just not eat fast food anymore. If you're eating fast food every day and you try to not eat fast food at all, you're going to be very frustrated. Instead of taking things out, I like to add things in. So for example, let's say that you're going to McDonald's and every time you get a double bacon cheeseburger with mayo, fries, and milkshake. Maybe the next time you go, instead of the milkshake and mayo, you get water this time, and maybe just with like ketchup and mustard on it, right? You can see how that kind of lowered down the calories a little bit. The milkshake's pretty high calorie. You lowered it down with the water. And this is just maybe how you're making things a little bit more into the eat more foods, right? Excuse me. So now the next time you go, you get the double bacon cheeseburger with a salad this time on the side and a water. So you can see how we got more veggies in there. We took out the fried foods. So maybe we have a little bit of the eat less foods. We have some more eat more foods. And then next, maybe this time we get a chicken sandwich with bacon and cheese and a salad with water. And you can see how easy this is, like changing just one little thing. And even if instead of going right into this one, we could just you can change it up however you need to. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the next time we get a grilled chicken with salad, potato, salsa, and water. So you can see how that changed, but it was just very small increments here. So kind of think of this in how can you change things up in your own life? So if you find that every night you're ordering pizza, how can we change the pizza a little bit, right? So kind of give yourself examples that go in your own life and just write down steps, like how can I make this a little bit better, right? All right, next, these are 11 strategies for your trigger foods. So I do have a video that goes deeper into this, but just to give you some tactical things now so that you can do something after this video and know like what direction to go into. Start off with buying sweets, but only in individual servings. So if you do find yourself buying a whole bag of Hershey Kisses, maybe just buy a smaller bag or maybe one Hershey bar at a time. And this is going to be huge because every time you want a sweet, you have to drive all the way to the store to get it. And that makes the convenience factor lower. If something's less convenient, you're less likely to do it. Next, same thing with the convenience is keeping trigger foods out of the house, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And this is something that eventually we want to get to the point where you can have food around you and not be triggered by it, because eventually you're going to get to the point where you're traveling, you're going to different places, and we don't want to feel out of control just because we're in a different place. So this is something maybe to start with, but eventually we want to get out of that and get to a place where things can be around you and you feel fine. Next, focusing on addition. So eating more veggies rather than subtracting the sweets out. Adding more things to your plate is going to be huge. You're going to find yourself fuller, more satisfied. Next, eating slowly with no distractions while paying attention to your sensations of hunger, fullness, enjoyment, and your thoughts. This is huge. So if you do find yourself eating in front of the TV all the time, or eating and you're on your phone all the time, or maybe you're on your phone eating and playing YouTube on the TV at the same time. I find myself doing this sometimes. And you'll find that it's a lot easier to be triggered by things because you end up eating this whole meal and you don't even remember what it tasted like. So that's huge. If you find yourself having a hard time with appetite, then eating slowly with no distractions is going to be huge for you. Next, indulge after you've comforted yourself in other ways, such as cuddling with your puppy, resting under a weighted blanket, or ranting in your journal. Find another way to deal with the emotions that has nothing to do with food, and then indulge in it after you've kind of tried those other emotional, like I can't even think of what it's called, those other things that will help with your emotions and help you feeling better. So those other like self-help kinds of things, right? Coping mechanisms. And then next, study your relationship with certain foods. So whenever you find yourself wanting them, notice your craving, label it, and investigate why you're feeling that way. So if you find, for example, I've had clients in the past say like it was a specific type of Little Debbie. For example, like for myself, I used to like the Christmas trees. So say it's a Christmas tree. Why is it a Christmas tree? And then you think back in the day, when I was a little kid, my mom wouldn't let me have the Little Debbies. She would always get these Little Debbies, but I wasn't allowed to have them unless I ate all of my meal, and I didn't like broccoli. And it's like this whole story. And if you dig that up and figure that out, it's a lot easier for you to change those things because you understand the why, right? And then the last part with the triggers is eat it every single day. And this is something I love to do with clients, and it really does work. Eat it every day as an experiment and see how it affects your cravings. A lot of the times cravings are a novelty thing. It's like this shiny object that I can't have. So like we talked about earlier, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to have this because I can't have it kind of thing. So if you make it a point to eat it every single day after a full meal, you're going to find that you probably get tired of it, just like every other food. And then abstain for a while as an experiment and see how it affects your cravings. So another thing to do is if you found that maybe eating it every day didn't help, then maybe try not eating it for a while and see if you're still craving that thing. Next, change your routine to avoid situations, sights, smells, peer pressures that tend to increase your cravings. So if you find with the food and feelings journal that like it's around certain times, it's when I'm putting myself in this situation, maybe I'm going to Starbucks to work on something, and every day I'm at Starbucks, I have to get a huge drink and 7 cake pops, then maybe Starbucks isn't the best place to be working on your stuff, and you might have to change your routine a little bit. Next, solve lifestyle factors. So a lot of the times cravings, you're going to find that these happen during PMS. They happen a lot if your stress is super high. When your cortisol is high, dude, you're going to be craving a lot more things. If your sleep is low, it really leads to a lot of things that include cravings. It includes insulin resistance. There's a lot of different things. So if you're not sleeping a lot, you're going to find yourself craving a lot of things. High stress, lack of sleep, lack of exercise, all of these things lead into craving more things. It raises your hunger hormones, and that's why you crave those things. And then lastly, change your language from that's bad to that makes it harder for me to achieve my goals, or I tend to overeat that. So labeling it as something a little bit different and paying attention to your language. Again, I've done a video on how language affects your results. If this is something that you'd like to check out, then let me know, and I will send you that video too. And lastly, the point, the whole point of this video is you may find that liberating yourself from the good versus bad mindset frees you to see more possibilities than ever before. And along the way, you may discover that this broader, more flexible mindset allows you not only to enjoy every meal a heck of a lot more, but also reach your goals more quickly. It's huge. So my question and what I want to leave you guys with is, how are you going to start shifting your mindset around food so that you can stop labeling foods as good or bad and start labeling them, stop labeling them completely? How are you going to add more foods in? How are you going to use the triggers and figure out like what's going well for you? And if you are somebody that wants to learn more about the food and feelings journal and how we actually use this with clients, then DM me food and feelings, and I will send you all about how to start doing that. So it's all about auditing what you're already doing, and then you can figure out how to change things from there. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this, and I hope you have a great night and a great start to your November.